The purpose of this video is to discuss the HIT strategy, a little bit of background information on how to use the strategy and why we're doing certain things. So with the HIT strategy, this is a vocabulary strategy that you will use during the pre-reading process, also the during reading process, and then also the post-reading process. So this strategy really hits all three stages of reading. So what is the HIT strategy? Well, what it is it's a way to focus on ways to sort information in the chapter. So there's a couple of things that we're going to do here. We're going to identify some main ideas. We're going to possibly identify supporting details. And then we're also going to identify vocabulary words that may be challenging, or vocabulary words that you may be required to learn and remember in the course of your class. So the HIT strategy uses 3 columns. And so on your paper, basically what you can do is you can divide your paper into 3 different parts. And on one part, you're going to write headings. Okay, so these are the headings and the subheadings that you'll find throughout the chapter. In the second column, you're going to write the main ideas. So these are the main points. And when we write those main ideas, it's really important that we put them in our own words, because again, that's going to help us remember things better. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to write the terms, or we're going to write our important vocabulary words here, section by section, so that we're able to go back and define them later. Before I go over an actual demonstration of how to use the HIT strategy, I want to talk a little bit about why we're doing what we're doing. So in the first column, we're writing down headings and subheadings. So I want to talk a little bit about why that's important. Well, the headings and subheadings, they work as a way for the author to identify the topic. Okay, the topic is going to be the person, place, or thing that the author is writing about. And so if you remember, when we talked about the 3 stages of reading, in pre-reading, we always talked about how we wanted to identify that topic because it allows us to activate our schema or our prior knowledge about that topic, and therefore we'll be able to remember the information a little bit easier. And more importantly, when we go back to retrieve that information, let's say we're in class and our teacher is asking us things, or we're on a test and we have to spit back that information, we're going to be able to know where to find it in our brains. In the second column, we're writing down ideas. And when we write down ideas, what we really want to do is we want to pick out those main ideas, that main part under each subheading. And so a main idea is the most important point about that topic, which is that subheading that the author wants you to know. So in textbooks, the main idea sometimes is directly stated by the author, and then sometimes it's implied. And what we mean by implied is we mean that the author will give us a bunch of supporting details, and then we have to figure out what's the main point. How do all of those things fit together? And the best way to identify the main ideas is to read through the section. And once you're done reading the section, just ask yourself, what was the most important thing about this topic? And so you basically, whatever the subheading is that the author wants me to remember. And by asking yourself this question, then you're able to write that main idea in your own words. Now, in previous modules, we talked about annotation. And so even though you're using the HIT strategy, that doesn't mean that you don't want to annotate as you read, as you go along. And so as you're reading and you're annotating, one of the things that you can annotate for or look for are those main ideas. So you can always highlight that main idea, and then you can add a marginal note paraphrasing that idea, especially if the author is directly stating it. Now, for those of you who are a little bit fuzzy on finding main ideas, you feel like you need a little bit more practice, I am posting a video of how to find the main idea, so you might want to watch that and see if that helps you a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go step by step and demonstrate for you or model for you how to use the HIT strategy. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and use this sample textbook chapter on altruism to demonstrate the use of this strategy. So again, we always want to use a 3-step reading process. And the nice thing about the HIT strategy is it takes us right through this 3-step reading process. So the first thing we want to do is we want to preview the text, we want to read the title, and we want to read all the headings and subheadings. So let's go ahead and do that with our altruism chapter. So first, let's preview the chapter. So as you can see here, our title is Altruism. I'm going to go ahead and highlight that. And we can see it's by Drew Western. And then if you look here, it's pretty easy to see, especially because this is italicized, that this is just some introductory information. So again, during the pre-reading process, we want to read this. Thus far, we have focused on the ties that bind. In this section, we examine another interpersonal process that brings people together, altruism. So one of the things that you might notice is they've already given you a definition of altruism. It's an interpersonal process that brings people together through altruism. So again, I'm just going to kind of make a marginal note, definition of altruism. Okay. A person who donates blood, volunteers in soup kitchens, or risks death, like the heroes of Aliner's World War II Odyssey, take it for granted, holding open a door, giving a stranger direction, or trying to make someone feel comfortable during a conversation. Indeed, charitable contributions in the United States alone exceed $50 billion a year. We begin this section by examining the theories of altruism. So again, even though I'm just pre-reading, I know that they're going to talk now about the different theories. We then consider experimental research on a particular form of altruism, bystander intervention. So again, this is something that I might want to pay attention to. And then I notice they're just giving me, a quick introductory, trying to catch my attention. You will want to read this. I'm not going to take time in the video to read this for you. But now let's keep going and let's keep looking for those headings and subheadings. So we can see here, we have theories of altruism. So this is a subheading. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight it. Next thing I have, ethical hedoism. So I'm highlighting that. I'm scrolling, genuine altruism. So I can see these are all the different theories of altruism. An evolutionary perspective. So they're going to probably talk about how we've evolved to do this. And then bystander intervention. So remember at the beginning, the author had talked about how he was going to talk about bystander intervention. And so I'm going to go ahead and highlight that subtitle as well. A model of bystander intervention. And then I can see I'm at the end of this section of this sample chapter. So now I've just gone through and previewed the text. I've read the title and I've gone ahead and noted all the headings and subheadings. So now I'm at number 2. So now what we want to do is we want to go back to the beginning of the chapter and we want to write down the headings and subheadings and make our chart. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so on my blank sheet of paper here, I am going to go ahead and I'm going to write the title of the chapter that we're reading. So that is altruism. And then I'm going to go ahead and make my charts. So again, I'm just going to kind of put a line and then I'm going to divide my sheet of paper into 3 different columns. The first column is going to be my headings. The second column is going to be my ideas. And then the third column is going to be my terms. And then I'm going to draw a little line here. Now, what you want to do now is you want to go back into the chapter. And even before you start reading it, you want to write down those headings and you want to go ahead and write down the terms. What I like to do, because you want all the terms to be with the heading, is I fill out this chart in chunks. So when I read the first chunk of altruism through the first subheading, I go ahead, when I start that, I write the subheading, and then I write down all the terms. And then I go back and I fill in the main ideas. And once I've done that, then I go ahead and draw a line under the bottom. And then I do this next thing for the next subheading. So I'll write down the second subheading, write down the terms, read through, and then go back to the ideas. So let's go ahead and do the first subheading. In this particular chapter, I want to show you how, even though we've already identified this is the main title of the chapter, and then we have our first subheading, the theories of altruism, but as I go through, I can see that basically what they're doing is underneath this subheading is there's more subheadings, and now they're going to really get into those different theories. And the first one is ethical hedoism. So the way that I'm going to fill my chart out is this. I'm going to go ahead and just write down theories of altruism. But as you notice, when you look at the paper, there's really no main idea. There's really no terms there. So I'm just going to kind of write that, and then I'm going to kind of draw a line. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write that second subheading, which is one of the theories of altruism, and that is ethical hedonism. So again, I've written down that subtitle. Now what I need to do is I need to go back into that subsection and I need to look for any bolded terms. So here under ethical hedonism, the first term that I notice that is bolded is right here, ethical hedonism. So I'm going to go ahead and circle it. And then I also notice that they're giving us the definition right here already for us. Okay, so basically now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and look through the rest of this section. And as you can see, there's nothing else that's really highlighted. So all I'm going to really worry about is the term ethical hedonism. So over here in my terms, I'm going to go ahead and write ethical hedonism. And the other thing that I'm going to go ahead and add is I'm going to go ahead and add the page number. So you can see this is page number 4. So you can see here I wrote the term ethical hedonism, and then I also put down the page number. It's not showing up very well, but I'm going to go ahead and put that it's on page 4. I like to do that way when I'm done reading, I know exactly where those terms come from. So now what it's time to do is go back and read through that section, because now what I want to be looking for are those main ideas. So let's go do that. And again, just because I'm using the HIT strategy doesn't mean that I don't want to annotate. So you're going to see that sometimes we're using these strategies in conjunction with one another. So many philosophers argue for ethical hedonism, the doctrine that all behavior, no matter how apparently altruistic, is, and it should be, designed to increase one's own pleasure or reduce one's own pain. As one observer put it, scratch as an altruist and watch a hypocrite blood. Okay, so again, they're telling me the definition of ethical hedonism, so I'm going to write this down. So again, no matter how altruistic, and if you remember, they gave us the definition of altruistic is things that bring people together. So, and then they talked about so it's basically nice things that you can do. So basically what ethical hedonism is it is when you do a nice thing to increase pleasure or reduce pain. Okay, so I just went ahead and in my annotations, I wrote down the definition. People who have many selfish reasons to behave selflessly. So again, they're talking about that people have selfish reasons. So they're being selfish. I'm going to write that down. People are frequently motivated by their emotions. So we're motivated by emotions. And behaving altruistically can produce positive emotions and dismiss negative ones. The overwhelming majority of Uhlener subjects who saved Jews from the Nazis reported that their emotions, pity, compassion, concern, or affections drove them to help. Pro-social acts can also lead to material and social rewards, as well as to positive feelings about oneself that comes from meeting one's ideal self-standards. So again, being altruistic, we can just write, it leads to material rewards and positive emotions. Okay. Behaving pro-socially can also reduce negative feelings. So again, this is another one. So it can also reduce negative. Some theorists explain that motivation to act on others' behalf in terms of empathetic distress, helping relieve the negative feelings aroused through empathy with a person with distress. This mechanism does not appear to be unique to humans. In one study, researchers trained monkeys to pull on a chain to receive food. Once the monkeys learned the response, the investigators placed another monkey in an adjacent cage who received the electric shock every time he pulled the chain. Despite the reward, the monkeys stopped pulling the chain, even starving themselves for days to avoid causing suffering in the other monkey. So again, this mechanism, this behaving pro-socially, it's not only in humans. found in monkeys. Okay. Empathizing with others apparently does involve feeling some of the things they feel. Okay, so that's kind of an important thing. So you feel others' feelings. Okay, in one experiment, participants watched videotape interactions between spouses and were asked to rate the degree of positive or negative effect one of the spouses was feeling at each instant. To assess the accuracy of these ratings, the experimenters correlated participants' ratings with the spouse's own ratings of how they felt at each point. Participants who accurately gauged these feelings showed a pattern of physiology similar to the person with whom they were empathizing, such as a similar level of skin conductance, but this was only true for unpleasant emotions. In other words, when people feel for, and these words, in other words, this is kind of where the author is summing things up. When people feel for another's pain, they do not just feel something similar, if less intensely, and use this feeling to gauge the other people's feelings. With positive emotions, apparently use their head instead of their gut. How selfish soever a man may be supposed, there are evidently some principles in his nature which interest him in the fortune of others and render their happiness necessary to him, though he derives nothing from it except the pleasure of seeing it. Of this kind of pity or compassion, the emotion for which we feel is the misery of others, whether we see it or not. So again, these little things, I did read it over. You could see that I read it really fast, but this is just a quote from somebody. Really, the bulk of the information is being found in this chapter. So what we're doing now is we're going to go back and we're going to write our definition for our vocabulary word, but we're also going to write our main points. So my main points, I've already annotated that. So I'm going to write down also reduce negative feelings, not only in humans, found in monkeys. We feel each other's feelings. So let's go add that to our chart. So as you can see here, I've gone ahead and I've written down those bullet points under the ideas. And again, I've taken them directly from my annotations. Now what I want to do is I want to go down and I want to write the definition of ethical hedonism. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it in a different color this time, just so that it sticks out a little bit for me. So here I went ahead and wrote the definition that I had annotated, where we're doing nice things for others to increase pleasure or reduce pain. So we've just gone through one little chunk. Again, post-reading, you probably want to read this over. Okay, ethical hedonism, this is what it is. This is the definition, because again, that's going to help the forgetting curve. And then what I like to do is I like to go ahead and I like to draw a little line, make my line a little bit thicker, to basically show that now I'm going to start with another subheading. So I am going to go ahead and scroll up a little bit, and I am going to go to my second subheading. Moving this over for you guys a little bit. And so my next subheading would be genuine altruism. So again, genuine altruism, and then I go back. I'm going to look for those bolded words. In this section, there were no bolded words, so there's nothing for me to write down. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and read it, annotate it just like we did before. If I happen to find a vocabulary in genuine altruism, because again, I'm going to think that I'm going to want to know what genuine altruism is. They're probably going to define it for me. So I'm going to actually just go ahead and add that now, even though it's not bolded, but I'm going to be looking for that definition. And if I come across other words in the reading that I know are going to be important vocabulary words, even if they're not bolded, you can go ahead and circle that, and then you can go ahead and add it back to your chart. Again, you're going to read it over, you're going to write your main points. So I'm not going to go ahead and finish the article, but I wanted to provide a little bit of a demonstration for you of how to use the HIT strategy and how to do it with an actual textbook chapter. So please don't hesitate to contact me with any questions you might have. If you want me to go over the strategy with you one-on-one, that's what I'm here to do. Have a great day.